So I just pushed the record button. If anyone has an objection, then please don't show yourself. So don't use your video and don't speak. Then you won't, and no one will see that you're here. So again, welcome everyone for this special occasion. That female wave of change will reflect on gender-based violence through meaningful conversations. For today, we have an amazing panel of 7 expert speakers to reflect on what we see happening in the world, in our country, in our community, our daily life, and of course, also from a professional perspective. For those who don't know me, my name is Ingun and I'm the founder and president of Female Wave of Change. And I will be hosting this panel today together with Adriana. And Adriana is our Female Wave of Change ambassador in Qatar and is our leading lady for the past 6 months in our humanities team. So welcome, Adriana, and please share why you think humanity should be at the core of our decision-making and actions.
Thank you very much, Ingun, for a very warm introduction. So I'm very delighted and humbled to be hosting this amazing panel with you. And to answer your question, coming from a background in business psychology, coaching, and entrepreneurship led me to focus all my work on human interactions. So my passion for human beings allowed me to connect with Female Wave of Change's vision, allowing me to be part of our humanities team. And with our global conference, we identified why humanities should be at the heart of all our activities. So that brings us to the focus of our thorough conversation today with amazing experts that will talk from their hearts on this topic, supporting the United Nations movement to orange the world. And today we would like to welcome and thank each one of our dear guest speakers and participants for being here with us. And I would like to remind you that you will have each one between 3 to 5 minutes. So please introduce yourself and explain why the focus on gender-based violence, or more specific, violence against women and girls, coming from your perspective is so important. And to open the conversation, we would love to invite Dr. Bindu Babu, a New York member of our Circle of Wise Women. So Dr. Bindu, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. It is such an honor to be here. I've been with Female Wave of Change now for, I think, more than 2-3 years. It's been very long, from the beginning. And it is an organization from my heart. Thank you, Ingun, for everything you do for us to gather us together. And it is a privilege to be here on this platform right now to speak a little bit more about gender-based violence. A little bit about me. I am from New York. I am a medical doctor, and I went through my own personal journey where I did my doctorate in natural medicine, my PhD in integrative medicine. I have authored a book, My Soulmate, My Love, My Narcissist. I am an activist for gender-based violence, domestic violence, emotional violence, and my expertise is narcissistic toxic relationships. I have spoken worldwide at many psychiatric conferences, and I've done trainings and workshops on teaching healthcare workers and clinical workers on treatment and recovery of healing of those who have been in toxic narcissistic relationships, as well as any sort of emotional abuse and domestic violence. It is something that we all need to bring some awareness, and I'm very proud to be here and discuss further with all my colleagues so that we can have a combined effort of intelligence and wisdom and experience to make an impact, a sustainable impact into the world.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Bindu, for highlighting the importance of mental health, recovering and healing from toxic relationships and domestic violence. So we would love to hear all from you in a bit. And now also with us tonight, we have Luigia Ingianni, humanist, employment lawyer dedicated to improving working relationships through dialogue, conciliation, and mediation. Luigia,
thank you. Thank you, Adriana, for your introduction, and thank you for inviting me and to be part of this interesting conversation. I'm really and sincerely grateful because to have the opportunity to share my experience as a gender equality expert and in gender mainstreaming expert, which includes gender violence specifically in the workplace, but most of all, as a victim of harassment in the workplace and expert practically of the many different shades of violence that sometimes are so slight and thin to become imperceptible, including being ignored. And I have experienced that in 2002, for the first time, what I consider a very violent episode, which happened in the very much male-dominated Italian company, whereby the general manager of the company, while I was writing a report, just bending my neck while I was writing, decided to give me a wet kiss on my neck, definitely unwanted kiss. To me, that was really violent. And it took a while for me to put myself back and remind my father's words, which were focused on respect. Respect is not negotiable. So I found the strength to say no to that episode and to that violent episode. And when I reported the episode to the HR, the funny thing was that everyone was laughing and saying, come on, Luigia, you know him. He just likes women. And it was just a kiss. It was just a kiss. For me, that was even more violent than the episode in itself. And after a few seconds, the man, the aggressor, was immediately out of the picture because it was Luigia who was kissed, Luigia who was responsible for something. Oh, nobody knows what she was wearing or why were they alone in the office. So, you know, of the victim blaming attitudes that are very common in these situations. And I myself doubted of being the reason why he did that, or maybe I had sent some wrong message inadvertently. So, you know, this the fact that the men are always out of the picture and the gender violence is considered a women issue is something I don't like, and I can't make peace with, I cannot get along with. And the reason why men very often are not feel authorized not to be part of the conversation is because they are not engaged. It's because we as women do not involve enough men in our conversation on gender violence. We are both part of the solutions. The fact that the data demonstrate that the majority of women are disproportionately affected by gender violence, especially domestic violence, which had a spike during COVID-19. It doesn't mean that men are not victims of violence. So we are both part of the problem and part of the solution. And to me, the only way to move from words to actions is to involve male in our conversation. So that's my strongest point. We have not enough men talking with us about this problem, which is not a women issue. Thank you.
Wow, Thank you very much, Luigia. We totally hear you, and I believe that many of us resonate with your personal story. And coming from a victim perspective to an activist perspective now, it's a much important topic that we would love to hear from you tonight. So thank you for bringing this to our attention and for sharing. And now I pass the word to our dear President Ingun. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And there's already so much on the table. Wow. Our next panel member is Jane Anyango. And I met Jane almost 10 years ago in Los Angeles. But Jane actually is one of our global ambassadors now and lives and works in Kibera, in one of the biggest slum settlements in sub-Saharan Africa. So really love to hear your share of the story, Jane.
Thank you so much, and good evening to most of us who are in Africa, and good morning to people who are out there. I'm happy to be part of this conversation. My name is Jane Anyango. As Ingun mentioned, I live and work in a slum settlement in Kenya called Kibera. It is one of the biggest globally. I know we have bigger ones in Asia. And why is it important to talk about gender-based violence, or rather violence against women, especially in the community? It is because violence affects everybody. Gender-based violence affects everybody. When people are fighting in the home, everybody is affected. In the community, even the neighbors are affected because the noise, whatever people are seeing, all those things are not things that people are able to be seeing. There are people who learn from others. Like they think that because somebody else is violated and they don't speak out or nothing is done, then violence is normal. So violence has been normalized so much in most communities that nobody cares when it happens. In fact, I was talking about it the other day when I said that we had this widow her home was demolished. The land was sold without her being involved. And most of women rights organizations did not come out to condemn this. And why are they not condemning this? Because they feel that it is not extreme enough. So to me, why should we wait till it is that extreme? We should look at the pointers. We should tackle it as early as possible so that others can know that it should not happen. When we leave the mild ones, then they grow bigger and bigger. And at the end of the day, it is all that big spectrum of violence. Everybody's crying, and the world is not changing. Yet we are investing so much to respond to violence. We can prevent violence if we work together. I'm happy to be part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you, Jane. I know there's a lot going on in your community. And when I hear violence is normalized, yes, that is awful to hear. So love to hear more from you later on, but I'm moving now to Dr. Celina Pina. She's also a member of our Circle of Wise Women living in the United States, and love to hear your story. Celina.
Thank you. I am honored to share this platform with these amazing and inspirational women. And thank you, Ingun and Adriana, for this invitation. And I'm taking my whole 5 minutes. Well, I'd like to add to the narrative some thoughts on emotional toxicity, if I can. Healing the scars that linger, be it emotional, mental, physical health, or be it visible, hidden, or secretive, the scars live on. My vision difficulties is often a reminder of my abuse by my abuser. So I'm going to just read to you something from my book, just a very short piece from my book, 5 Keys to Emotional Oneness, the Emotional Detox System, which will set the foundation for my thoughts for today's presentation. So when experiencing emotional imbalances, we experience emotional disturbances that are deeply hidden and protected, cleverly buried with the intentions of afflicting the unconscious, causing cognizant interruptions and perplexities. These disturbances create vacuums of emotional density, leaving no room for clarity. The emotional imbalances are invisible and deeply embedded in colors of deception, creating pain from eternal intensities that have long passed, yet control our consciousness. While we hold these memories sacred and work diligently to avoid recalling or envisioning these painful moments, they become an unwanted and sometimes unexpected visitor. When we experience traumatic events in our lives, many times these memories are not readily accessible, but are working in the darkness of our emotional vulnerabilities. Most times, these painful memories make unexpected visits and that alter our character, causing emotional toxic moments of emotional blockage, stoppage, and flatlining. So with that in mind, let's consider what keeps these scars alive. So I think first, it's important that we understand the emotional, mental, physical, spiritual fragmentations created by these events, as well as the incongruencies in our beliefs. Second, we must restore and rejuvenate those shattered pieces of self that possibly begin to form in childhood, where they compound throughout life's experiences and exposures or the lack of. Lastly, the fragmentations shift who we are, and in many instances distort our beliefs, perceptions, actions, responses, and most importantly, our sense of self. I believe if these unexpected, uninvited moments that awaken our consciousness to these scars and cause these periodic or frequent intrusions of emotional imbalances. So let me just tell you what my 5 B's are for prevention and care. So, because these are important to think about in terms of where these things get started. So one is balancing traditional cultural development mindsets. I know in many traditions, including mine, men and boys are over women and girls, right? This training of the brain begins at birth, and we are conditioned to view these behaviors as amenable. So it didn't just begin, it began. It didn't only begin at birth for us, it began in our ancestry line. So we have to be cognizant to that. The second is brain healthy, especially as it relates to developing the developing brain. Our children, that's our children, they need to develop healthy mindsets. It begins there. So no matter what's happening in that home, some way we got to work double, triple time to make sure that those mindsets, those resiliencies, those coping mechanisms are put into place. And understand how to they need to understand how to balance their internal system. Third is boundaries. I said boundaries. No, boundaries. Knowing your boundaries. What will you allow to enter into your value system? How do you value yourself? What makes you valuable? We must be in charge and in control of protecting ourselves first. We must fight fear and we must know our value. Fourth is build and acknowledge your power, your core, the authentic you, by illuminating those fragmentations and examining those uninvited visitors. Why do they show up? And locate the mechanism for your control, your coping and management systems. 5, believe in yourself. Understand and feed your value system. They're innate. It's born in us. It's just waiting for you. And turn up your volume. Speak your words with clarity and conviction and grow into success and wisdom. In closing, this pandemic has done a lot of things, but it has highlighted in full view the reality of past inequities. It's been highlighted. These are not new conversations. Over the years, these inequities showed up in fragmentations. My book is all about the fragmentations that we still live with. We think we're done with them, but we're not. Today, we have been forced to see the depths and of the truth and now seek ways to create a global fusion for change. That's what the pandemic has helped us do. It has showed us the depth of what we're looking at. Before, it didn't happen in my neighborhood. It doesn't come to my island. I don't see it here. We have seen it in clear view. You know, the trauma, the abuse, it's in our face. It is now time to show up and make substantial and sustainable change. The pandemic has done the in-depth research and provided us with the insight, vision, and the formula for needed transformations. Thank you for giving me that time. Appreciate it.
Wow, Dr. Celina, there's a lot of information again, and I love it. And I totally agree that the pandemic has only shown the depth of what is going on. And now we have to show up and make sustainable changes. And I really hope that by the end of this meeting, that this get together, that we do agree on certain points that we can contribute. Thank you very much. And I'm moving to the next, and I'm already writing down so much that I'm getting trapped in my papers. So the next is Asmau, from our ambassador from Nigeria. So Asmau, would you like to introduce yourself and share your vision on gender-based violence? I see already a lot happening in the chat box. Asmau.
Thank you very much, Ingun. Good evening, ladies. Good evening, my co-panelists and all other participants. I'm happy to be here and I appreciate the organizers, Adriana, my very good friend, for finding me worthy to be part of this discussion for today. This discussion to me is very timely and is very close to my heart because growing up from a traditional African background and a conservative one for that matter, it wasn't easy growing up as a woman or as a little girl child from the village. I grew up to see how women were treated. Our parents, my grandparents, none of the women in my family could even attend any family meeting and be given the opportunity to talk. Whenever men are gathered, women are gathered, the women take the back seat. We never see our parents come to the front seat to sit down. And if the seats were not enough, our parents, the women were meant to sit on the floor. All the girls were told to sit on the floor, while some of the men would sit down and others will be standing and the boys will be standing. So from an early age, I began to discover the discrepancies. I began to discover, to see the discriminatory practices based within our culture, cultural practices and other negative social norms. So in my own growing up, it became a challenge to me to begin to interrogate, to begin to question the existence of this norm. Why is it that because at an early age, I couldn't understand why we were not treated equally? As a child, I had a free mind and I thought everyone was equal. After all, we're all human beings. But growing up, I discovered that equality is not an African context. Equality is a mirage. So we are, even with the quest for gender equality, growing up, becoming a voice, becoming an activist, women rights activist, I still discover that there are huge gaps that we need to work in Africa, especially in northern Nigeria, to bridge these gaps. And there are many barriers for us bridging these gaps. One is the issue of religion. Religious interpretation or doctrines keeps the woman at bay. And so that further exacerbates violence because you're taught that you are supposed to be have a submissive femininity and then dominant masculinity. A woman is not supposed to question when a man talks. Even as an intellectual, a married woman, there are certain requirements that you're supposed to possess to be a good wife. That if you behave in a certain way, you are seen to be going against the norm. And so therefore you are not a good wife. And all these things boiled up together to make you so submissive and not be able to speak out. And that is why most women in northern Nigeria that have experienced one form of violence or the other cannot speak out because they tell you about family honor. They tell you it's going to stigmatize you. You can't get a man to marry you. You can't move further in life because of the stigma that will be attached to your family. And therefore they tell you, oh, it's a shameful thing. So they encourage the culture of violence. During this pandemic, it has become so predominant in the society where we see, because of the lockdown, a whole lot of violence against women, especially rape against minors. A child as young as 3 months was raped in northern Nigeria, so much so that the intestine of that child came out. I still have the report with me. It's sad. So we begin to ask, what is happening? But you know, all these cases cannot even go through legal processes. Why? Because they're trying to protect the dignity of the child, trying to protect the integrity of the family. And so therefore it is considered a taboo to speak out. And one other thing is the societal influence on these cases. We have inequitable norms and practices that makes the men have their own way, because when a man hits his wife, he is seen as a macho man, he's seen as a hero. And when a woman reports the case, you have been, instead of you becoming now the survivor or the victim, you have been stigmatized to be someone that, why should you report your domestic cases outside? And I fault this to the society and to the authorities, because we are supposed to have stringent laws that would criminalize all these issues of violence against women. But it is not, that's not what we see. The government position, the legal system, the security system does not place punitive, stringent punitive measures to perpetrators. So we look and we see the culture of impunity every now and then. So for me, I think the first basic thing that should be done for us in this country, for me as an African woman, is for us to put laws, to put stringent laws all over legislative processes that would further entrench the rights of women. I'm happy that today is in International Human Rights Day, and I remember a speech by the former First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton, who said, women's rights are actually human rights. And if that's what we're talking about today, then Nigerian women deserve human rights. Northern Nigerian women deserve human rights. And so let me pause here and give the floor for other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asmau, and I can feel your passion in this, and that is so important to recognize what is happening in all different countries, and still the whole cultural background, and yeah, I can feel what is going on. There's so much power there. Thank you very much, and Adriana, I'm going back to you.
Thank you, Ingun. Wow, I'm still fired as well, with so many important and insightful contributions from all of you ladies. And to follow on that, we would love to invite Margaret Osborn, Office of the Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, to Dr. Ahmed Al-Meraiki in Qatar, long-standing history of advising in humanitarian assistance and law. Dear Margaret, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Adriana and Ingun. And so I said I would, I asked to speak last, but I didn't ask to follow such an amazing speaker. So I hope everyone lowers their expectations a little bit. Asma, I think I can speak for everyone when I say that your words were amazing and powerful and touched everyone. Thank you for sharing. And I think you point out that today's Human Rights Day and that Nigerian women are included in that. I would broaden that to all women and everyone. And I think my remarks are going to be a little bit different because they're going to come from the perspective of the public sector and what governments are doing and kind of what the pandemic has shown about sexual and gender-based violence. You know, today the Secretary General called on everyone to act collectively with human rights at the front and center to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and to build a better future for all. I think echoing the words of most of you, building that future for all is, you know, for men, for women, for girls, for everyone. And that necessarily has to include a gender focus on it. Before the pandemic, you know, I think we all probably know the numbers, 243 million women and girls were sexually or physically violated, underwent violence from an intimate partner before the pandemic. Now that's at least tripled. In some areas, it's become even worse. And I think that really has shed a light on something that the UN has called the shadow pandemic. And it really highlights the challenges that we face as a society of sexual and gender-based violence. It really brought that to the forefront. You know, and I think that right now we're in a unique time. We're 25 years since the Beijing Declaration, which showed commitments on ending violence against women. And that's being reviewed through a process called Generation Equality. That's going to be large forum will be held in February. And that discussion is about bridging generations between women, young women, older women. And as Luigia pointed out, it's importantly including men. It's important to bring them into the conversation as well. And the conversation is to find out what it means to push gender equality and to use a multi-stakeholder approach, including government, CSOs, the UN, private sector, to raise awareness, but to also make strides. And I think that will really make some noise. And I think that coupled with the pandemic, you know, this 25-year anniversary coupled with the pandemic we're in creates this unique environment for a renewed focus of governments and civil society to highlight the challenges we're facing on sexual and gender-based violence and the vulnerability that women and girls face. So I think working, you know, in the public sector, I think the main thing that we think of is what can we do? What are tangible things that we can do to try and confront some of the challenges and build back better on sexual and gender-based violence and gender equality. The most important thing, I think, is to collect sex, age, and disability disaggregated data. We don't have enough data on there that's desegregated by gender specifically. You know, everything from affects women in terms of PPE kits. You know, there's a lot of data out there that they fit women differently than men, which is just, you know, a gender approach to it. But even more so, there's an SGBV approach that home isn't always the safest place for a woman. And as lockdowns happen, that may prevent the spread of the virus, but it doesn't necessarily provide safe places for women, and it increases domestic violence. So the first thing is to gather data, more data. The second is to have more consultations with women and girls and other at-risk populations, even if that has to be done remotely, and include safety audits so that we're looking and understanding the challenges faced by diverse groups. The third is access barriers. Assess barriers and accessing services to accurate information. You know, there's plenty of data that shows that women don't have phones as much as men. And so you have places in the world where women don't have access to the same amount of information. As children go from their school education in a school, as it becomes remote and online, we can integrate messaging into that so that they receive that. There's also issues of, in many areas, women who would do the shopping. If you're going out and getting food and you have to, that distance is very long, now you want to make the distance shorter. So you've got to have smaller distribution centers for food to meet food insecurity challenges, but also you can use that as a way to put up posters and get data and information out to people. The other big problem with accessing information is referral pathways. For people who have been subjected to violence are, you know, heavily interrupted and disrupted by the pandemic, whether they have changed, whether there's nobody on the other end of a hotline, whether reporting or referrals happen in a different way. So part of the information that needs to be disseminated includes up-to-date information about referral pathways and paying attention to making those pathways open. Governments need to ensure that they exist, which brings me to the last thing about how we can work with governments and what governments can do. The biggest thing that countries are doing right now is focusing on stimulus packages and the economic recovery from the effects of COVID. Part of that needs to be included social protection measures for women, whether that is ensuring, I mean, in one country, it could be ensuring areas are well lit so that people aren't threatened when they go and run their essential services. but it can also be something that involves funding female organizations and female groups that provide support and stability for domestic violence victims. Either way, you got to bring sexual and gender-based violence onto the agenda and encourage COVID-19 sensitive approaches. The first thing you can't do, that you shouldn't do, is divert resources. Sexual and reproductive health services are often low on the totem pole of services that governments want to provide, and they're often cut first. And a lot of the resources have been diverted to the COVID response, whether that's funding, whether it's shelters that have been turned into extra beds and space for COVID response, or other protection services. The other thing that's on the agenda is child marriage, which isn't something that's kind of that's been brought up, but within a lot of countries, the legislation that doesn't prevent child marriage and looking at the age of marriage, this can be a time to raise that again, to use, it thrives in the states where it's not legislated. So we can use this time to revisit that and kind of heighten awareness to that. While I don't think that that's necessarily something that's been disproportionately affected by COVID, while we're relooking at all of this kind of gambit of SGBV, that's something that we can also look at. So on the flip side of violence against women is female empowerment, which is something that we can do through the economic stimulus packages, but also, you know, there's a lot being done to empower women-led organizations. Yesterday, the UN announced $25 million being allocated from the SURF Fund to UNFPA and UN Women. That's going, and 30% of that has to go to women-led organizations. This puts the resources into the hands of women-led groups that are responding to gender-based violence. They're the ones who most have that data and ability to know what the needs are on the ground, particularly in a humanitarian setting. And it allows them to adequately address the needs of survivors, strengthen local systems. You know, Asmau spoke about the need for judicial reforms and legislation that encourages them to take a voice in their local politics and to get those judicial reforms that are needed. So I think I'm going to leave it there, but just wanted to share my 2 cents on government actions in this space.
Wow, thank you very much, Margaret. We really needed to hear all those tips and the practical actions that we can start taking from the organizational perspective. And also what caught the attention here, reunite and also highlight the female empowerment. So we can start doing something within Female Wave of Change. Thank you. And I see that Luigia has raised her hand. So would you like to carry on, Luigia, before we introduce Dr. Saskia?
Yes, Margaret, I couldn't agree more with what you've said. The fact that female empowerment is obviously something we should address now, together with the child marriage and all the other legislative amendments that are very much needed, as well as the implementation of legislative pieces of legislations or UN recommendations, including the ILO Convention 190 on the elimination of every kind of violence from the world of work. One of the things that got my attention was about the gender disaggregated data. From my perspective, being very much involved in this kind of analysis, what really, where we really struggle is to find data before even getting disaggregated data. The problem is that women do not report violence. So even before trying to get some data and to analyze the data from a disaggregation of the gender perspective, we need to support and to find a way not only to create awareness, but to give voice, courage to those women who have been victim of different kind of violences and don't have either the courage, the strength, the opportunities, and don't have access to those services that Margaret was talking about, the protection services, which will give them the opportunity to speak up. This is, in my opinion, comes even before all the other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Luigia, for highlighting the importance of all those, and we will go deeper on that in a while, just after Dr. Saskia. So Dr. Saskia, welcome here. And before I introduce you, I would like to just let you know that we are going through now of what you think that the focus on gender-based violence, or more specific, violence against women and girls, coming from your perspective, is so important. So I'm honored to introduce Dr. Saskia Harkema, our Global Ambassador in Female Wave of Change, and also a human rights activist. Dr. Saskia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Adriana. I hope, can you hear me well? Okay, good. Yes, I would like to take another angle at the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, because of course it becomes very visible at the level of a family. But I think we have to also bear in mind that there is a very strong correlation between gender-based violence and sexual abuse and poverty. So there is, and I want to, the angle that I want to take is to talk about, you could say, what for me is the excess of gender-based violence, and that is human trafficking, of which mostly women and young girls are the victim. And I was involved in a discussion about this topic recently, and I must say that I was shocked to hear that it is one of the most lucrative businesses in the world. So the selling of women and children is a business, which basically means that this is not only about violence, but it's also about the fact that human beings are reduced and seen as commodities that can be sold. And what happens, and this is when women fall prey to also sexual abuse, is that they are often in situations of big poverty. You know, they leave, they are single parents, and they are promised that they will get a job, or that they can have a better perspective if they go to another country, and they end up in prostitution. And this is happening everywhere in the world. So they end up in prostitution, and what happens is that all their documents are taken away. So all their legal documents are taken away, and that means that you also have no possibility to prove who you are. And what is worse is that also family members are often afraid to report the disappearance of these women and children, because they are very often living in countries which are so corrupt that if you do that, it may cost you your life. So you could say that there's a chain of events which lead to a situation which is, it's unimaginable. And what is very important is, of course, to how can you break this cycle of poverty, violence, and also women ending up in this situation where they have basically no perspective. What I maybe also should mention, because it's not only women victim of sexual abuse, but also women getting exploited in all kinds of industries. I can give you an example, I have to be honest, which was very recent here in the Netherlands. Because one of the sectors where women are exploited brutally is the textile industry. And you know, we know the stories of factories for instance, in Bangladesh. It was a few years ago, but I recently spoke to someone here in the Netherlands who works with startups, especially from migrant communities. And she was telling me I went to visit a factory owner. It was from Romania in this case, but it doesn't matter whether it was Romania. And there was a woman there, a young woman of 16 years, and she was working there day and night, making T-shirts, which we buy for €3 a day. So I think that we also have a responsibility as consumers, that we have to think about the things that we are buying, because we, in that sense, are perpetuating these horrific circumstances. So you could say that human trafficking is the most extreme form of violence against women and children, and also sexual abuse. But it's not a small problem. If you want the numbers, 500 billion euros a year are earned in this business. So apparently there are people that are not only, and this sounds so crude when I heard it, that I really had also to cry. There are apparently people in this world that are willing to buy women. And I think this is something that also needs to be, we need to be aware of it, and we have to break with the silence surrounding this issue. So what can be done? And I've been speaking also to organizations involved in this, and a lot can be done. We can do a lot, and especially an organization like Female Wave of Change. One of them is education. It starts all with education, is that at a very early age already, you not only make children aware of the importance of human rights, but also girls, make them aware of the importance of being treated with respect and not accepting this form of abuse, whether it's at the family level or in the most extreme form. This is where you have to start. It's about raising awareness, raising consciousness also. And this is how you can also change the mindset. Another one is working with, it's raising the awareness among these corporations, which I mentioned. Again, we have a role, I think, as Female Wave of Change. You know, we have to know all these Hugo Boss, or I don't know how all these companies are called, but how do they make their clothes? In the cacao industry, in the everything that has to do with electronics, there are so many industries where women and children are being abused and exploited. So let's talk with all these CEOs and boards and ask them, okay, can you also secure funds to, for instance, this was an example, to set up shelter homes for these women that have been victim of human trafficking, and support them with empowerment programs, teaching, also, and offering them an alternative. And I think, at a more, you could say, strategic level, this is also about advocacy. And this is, I think, one of the important roles of Female Wave of Change, which very, very clearly also emphasizes the importance of these feminine values. And this is not, it's about feminine values, but it's also about, you could say, the role of feminine values and of women in our societies. Somehow also, and also this happens unfortunately in families, because this is why women become the subject of domestic violence. We are seen as objects. Once you don't see the other person as a human being, apparently then you are allowed to hit someone or abuse someone. So this phenomenon of making objects of women, whether it's at the family level, or it's in an industry, or it's in a market where human women become commodities, I think this is the root cause of the problem. And this is why it's so important to talk about the importance of these feminine values, because this is exactly what you want to counter. This is exactly what you want to raise awareness about, advocate for, and also educate people about.
Wow, beautifully said, Dr. Saskia. Thank you so much for your amazing contribution on the topic of the sexual violence, sexual abuse, and also the awareness in the corporations to maybe integrate those victims in their organizations. So now I pass on to Ingun again so she can carry on. Thank you, Ingun.
Yes, well, I know that some of you are already, I really want to dive in, but we are going to take a step back, and I am going to share my screen. And yes, I see hands raised, and we are going to respond on that, but I am going to share my screen first. Let's see. And want to share a very short part of the
We have
speech.
seen the close connection between COVID-19 pandemic and the further rise of all kinds of violence against women and girls. We called it the shadow pandemic. We've also seen two types of response. There's a response for citizens who present with this life-threatening illness, and another response for those who come for help with a life-threatening partner. We've seen all hands on deck for the fight against the pandemic with incredible compassion and selfless service by health workers, ordinary people, governments providing changes overnight, shutting borders, massive fiscal injection, industry breakthroughs, and protection protocols backed by determination. We need a comparable amount of determination and effort to be given to the global fight to end violence against women and girls, so that we can see results and flatten the curve of this destructive shadow pandemic.
Okay, I'm not going to show everything because we already need a lot of time for all the other things. So, Adriana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So just to summarize this amazing message, we would love to highlight here the shadow of the pandemic. So this year is like no other. Even before COVID-19 hit, violence against women and girls had reached pandemic proportions. Globally, 243 million women and girls were abused by an intimate partner in the past year. Meanwhile, less than 40% of women who experienced violence reported or seek help. As countries implemented lockdown measures to stop the spread of the coronavirus, violence against women, especially domestic violence, intensified. In some countries more than others, so calls to helplines have increased fivefold. In others, formal reports of domestic violence have decreased as survivors find it harder to seek help and access support through the regular channels. School closures and economic strains left women and girls poorer, out of school and out of jobs, and more vulnerable to exploitation, abuse, forced marriage, and harassment. So in a nutshell, just summarizing what every one of you just shared here tonight. Ingun, back to you.
Yeah, and what we, of course, are very interested in, and it has been said several times, is what can we do? And as Female Wave of Change, we always talk about reshaping the future. And you also heard Executive Director of the UN Women, Dr. Pumzile, mention it, that, well, let me see, because I'm stuck in my. So today, although the voices of activists and survivors have reached a crescendo that cannot be silenced or ignored, ending violence against women will require more investment, leadership, and action. It cannot be sidelined. It must be part of every country's national response, especially during the unfolding COVID crisis. And what she mentioned is, and I'm going to stop share, what she mentioned is all hands on deck to fight the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So how to fight in a comparable way this gender-based violence? How can we do that? And more specifically, because of course we are very interested in that part, how can we as Female Wave of Change contribute to create awareness at all levels of society and really reshape the future? So, who would like to step in? Luigia, I saw that you already raised your hand. Is that still?
Yes, I'm always ready to step into the conversation. We were saying before something about the involvement of the private sector. I believe this is fundamental because governments need support, not only from the private sector, but by people, by volunteers. And how do we get there? This is something we should discuss. And in my opinion, looking at the problem from a world of work perspective, being this my field, the reason why I see the involvement of the private sector as crucial is because already in the world of work, there are rules and conventions, as the one I mentioned before, the recent ILO Convention 190 approved and published in July 2019, that are tools that can really support in practice on a daily basis people to take care and address small episodes of violence that, as said before, sometimes are totally invisible, are imperceptible because they are not even considered as a forms of violence, including the ones that many women experience at home and in the domestic environment, which is supposed to be the safest place for them. Now, those rules are already there. And the impact, I've also analyzed the impact of domestic violence during COVID on the workplace. And the cost of violence and gender-based violence is huge. Now, if we want to really be heard in a world that cares more about money than other aspects and the human side and of the human side, I believe that talking about the money, talking about the cost, the real cost of gender-based violence is one of the elements to leverage, to get attention, to be listened to. Of course, government not only needs to invest money to provide support, protection services to women who have been abused, but there should be also a system to identify the abuse and make it more visible. So places where women can go and report and where the women can be assured to be protection, can be provided protection. Someone was saying about the education. Education is obviously the most important tool, in my opinion, to make women aware. But I believe as a mother also that gender equality begins at home, even before all the involvement of the governments, of the private sector, of the business. We as individuals can play a major role in gender equality by educating our children to equality, to parity. And if we look, for example, at the normal brainwashing that boys are subject since the very early stage of their life. A child, even at the park, a child who falls down. Come on, don't cry because boys don't cry. There are so many stereotypes, gender stereotypes, with which our children grow up. And this will make a huge impact in their perception, in the perception of themselves. And what Dr. Celina was saying about the self-identity, the authentic us. If we grow up by listening that girls cry, boys don't cry, girls are emotional and boys are not emotions, or are not even supposed to show emotions, this will contribute to create their authentic self that they will bring in any other place and in any other stage of their life, impacting the relationship with the equality, with gender, and with any kind of person they will deal with in their life.
Okay. Thank you very much. You've already really put some really valuable things on the table. So I really would like to move to Jane now. So Jane.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ingun, and thanks so much to the powerful speakers. And it's interesting that, you know, it cuts across. It's a conversation that we all the women want to have, irrespective of where they are, meaning we are all badly affected. So as we are able to come to the such conversations and to meetings and speak, what about the common woman who does not even leave her doorstep? That woman who is caged inside her house. We should come up with structures that are ensuring that every woman is reached, that every woman is informed enough to talk to their children as young as they are, that violence is wrong. And we should have like disaggregated data that is showing the different forms of violence and how much they affect people. Because at times we concentrate so much on extreme violence that we don't talk about the ones that have been socially accepted. If we are talking about sexual harassment, you find, you know, those catcalls that we take to be normal. We find that, you know, the stalking, the pictures, the taking of pictures without your consent. And mostly people don't talk about these things because, you know, we have been cultured mostly to respond to violence and not to prevent violence. Let us come up with conversations that are going to enable us to come to prevent violence. Let us have the conversations everywhere. The market women, like when they are in the market, is it possible for them to bring up all these conversations? Is it possible for children in school to talk up, to bring these conversations aboard? We have this platform we call the talking boxes, where we encourage kids to write and share whatever they want to share in the boxes. And you listen to the experiences the kids have. You know, those shouts at home where maybe the woman wants money, the mother wants money, and the father throws the money at her and shouts at her. And they don't know how much the kids are affected by such. You know, when the kids are playing and, you know, someone taps on the box, or someone just comments on their dressing, or the young girls whose breasts are just coming out, then people are commenting on that, and others think that, you know what, it's normal. These are just breasts. We all have breasts, but we don't know how these young people are affected psychologically. We should break down, like we should really break it down to every aspect of violence, and then start the conversation everywhere, and then have the policies also, even at home. We should have our guiding principles at home. To what extent should people just interact? How do we come up with our boundaries that people don't just pass these boundaries? So these are conversations that should be everywhere in all those invitations we have to meetings. And we have, you know, those sections that saying that, you know, respect each other, not just respect women, because what is coming out right now is that people abuse each other. You know, the men are also abused. So now let's come up with conversations that can help us to shun violence at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's a lot of information again. I would like to go to Bindu, Dr. Bindu.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on an aspect that everybody's speaking about, which is prevention, and it's very important. It's educating our children, educating everything that has been mentioned is very profound. But I just wanted to bring a little different aspect also, a section that of realization that needs to be addressed, and that is many of us are having ancestral burdens. And when I say that, that means we don't have the perspective of giving that kind of compassion, quality, or love. We may think we are, but we may not be giving it to our children. We as parents will always feel we're doing the best. And that's because of our wisdom from our backgrounds of our family and what we've learned that works for us, that worked for them, and that worked for their forefathers. But now it's about bringing awareness not only on that aspect, but the fact that children are brought up in these environments where they have developed coping mechanisms that causes this type of aggression. People generally don't wake up in the morning and say, let me be abusive. There's reasons why of insecurities and other issues, and especially, let's say, the victim, who are generally codependents, who have a very extreme lack of self-love that allows this type of abuse, as well as cultural bias, finances, education, work, and trying to feed your children. And there's a whole plethora that we've discussed, but there's also a mental aspect where they feel this is what they deserve, or this is what they can only get, and this is how to survive, and they keep going back. Statistically, at least in the United States, I can say a victim leaves their perpetrator at least 6 to 7 times before they finally leave. So what happens here is, in most organizations, and I can speak for the United States, when we try to help these women who look for safe spots, and we have hidden underground churches or underground places where you're trying to save them and keep them safe from perpetrators, unfortunately, the spot gets exposed because the abuser always apologizes or says they'll change it or don't break the family, and the victim goes back. So what is also needed to understand is the compassion to help these victims, even when they make unobvious choices, right? In the sense, many of us may feel, well, you're getting help, you're getting provision. It's pretty obvious that your abuser is hurting you, and yet you keep going back. Unfortunately, many people think, well, then they deserve it. And what many don't understand is you have a physiological trauma bonding most of these victims, where it's like in science, you have a hormonal addiction, just like the way you have addiction to cocaine or addiction to drugs, where you have the highs and lows, where you're addicted to that abusive cycle of trauma. So we must implement programs of compassion and understanding of those people as well, because that brings sustainability. And that also bring awareness to the healthcare providers or the life coaches or whoever, the volunteers should have that training and understanding that there is high likely that these victims will go back and may get killed. So it's important to train these people to give the compassion understanding as well, to make sustainability, to prevent gender-based violence or domestic violence or emotional abuse, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I just wanted to put that in.
Yeah, thank you. Well, very valuable. And I would like to ask Dr. Celina to respond on that, because I know that you're a little bit on the same page. So can you add something to what has been said?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we also have to understand that I've been there and experienced every one of them. And through the 20 years that I worked the streets as a victim, I didn't know who I was. So it's real important that we learn the value of who we are. that we can teach women and expose women and men. And the emotional pieces are very important. How do we get through the emotionality of all of this? And, you know, they didn't, as Dr. Bindu said, they didn't wake up one morning and decide that this is what I'm going to be, or so I'm going to do, or so I'm going to receive, or so I'm going to go back to. It's all about the soul, the spirit, the consciousness has not been healed. It is just fragmented. And you can't grab the fragmentations because there's too many of them. You can't figure out how the puzzle pieces go together. So it's our job to teach them how to put back together those fragmentations, how to put back together those pieces of who I am. Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my values? And once I knew my value, no one could touch me again. It was not going to ever happen again because now I know my value. And then we protect our children, and the mindset has to change. We have to change the mindset of women and men. The mindset has to change through education, through programs, through circles, whatever's happening in that community that works for that culture. The mindset has to change. We have to begin to develop a new mindset. Brain health is important because we know that the brain absorbs this, the plasticity of the brain absorbs these moments, and it grows into that moment and becomes that. So we have to switch the mindset. So programs that give you the ability to make those mindset shifts. The other important piece of this that Dr. Bindu just mentioned is that we have places for them to go, but many times, like you said, they'd leave. But the other piece is that many times there's nothing for them. So what are they going to go to after that? Where's the job? Where's the roof over the head? Where's the family members that are going to keep me and my kids safe from this person? Where do I go? You go back because getting the beatings is a lot easier than living in the streets. So that for me is a major one. You can't change anything if there's no hope. Gotta have hope.
We got to have hope. Absolutely, yes. And I'm already thinking, you know, with Female Wave of Change, thinking about the circles of change to really expand that and to really make it more professional, but also our whole education program that will be expanded, that we need to focus also on issues like this. So this is going to be something that I really would like to work with you, and probably also the humanities team will come forward with ideas how to do this. Pam, I do see your hand, but I really want to go to Asmau and Saskia before we open. So, so please, Asmau.
Thank you very much. For me, I think there's need for us to create awareness for people to recognize that violence against women and girls is a violation of human rights, because people don't know, and there's no awareness that hitting a woman, violating the rights of women is even a crime. People don't know that. And again, we also need to, I don't know, maybe through the humanity team, begin to create this awareness that it is also a barrier to the health of a woman. Because through violence against women, many women have died, they've lost their life, many have been deformed, families have been separated, and a whole lot of mental health issues that are associated to violence against women. And also the implication of violence against women to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is also another thing, because we have to link violence against women to Sustainable Development Goals, because Goal 5 is at the center of the entire 17 Sustainable Goals. So if women's rights are not respected and their health are not taken care of, many countries will not be able to achieve that. And also we should encourage survivors to begin to speak out. We should discourage the culture of silence. That is what is killing, especially in African countries. Women should speak out for their rights, especially when they are violated. And then on the part of the government, there is need to allocate certain amount for in the budgetary provision, what we call gender responsive budgeting. A conscious budget by the government to take care of gender-based violence, because I don't think there are countries, I don't know any in Africa that has any budgetary provision for violence against women issues when they arise. So most times you find out that the families of the victims are left to take care of both the psychological needs and also the financial implication of violence against women. So basically, this all that I need to say as I conclude the discussion, because like I said on the chat box, I need to rush out. I have an interview by 7 on our national TV. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Adriana, for this beautiful initiative. Thank you, Ingun, for always believing in me. Thank you for all the panelists and our participants. I love you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Asmau, and I'm really grateful for all the wonderful work that you do, and that you raise your voice and amplify your voice, and for so many women in Nigeria. So thank you so much. So you're excused. Go to your television interview. Thank you very much. Saskia, I really would like to hear you already added some very valuable things in your initial introduction of what we can do. But would you like to add something to it? And then, Pamela, I have your after Saskia.
Okay. Yes, I've been listening intently to everything that has been said, and I think we have to go back to the root cause of what domestic violence and sexual abuse, and we spoke about it. It revolves for me also around values, and I think we have to be very aware, because this is what we often speak about also as female wave of change. We say this is a male-dominated world, but I think we underestimate the impact of this male values up to the level of the family structure and education. Because the male values, if we would have to kind of summarize them, is about, and this is what we also, this is how education is built, because this is how our economies function. It's about winning, it's about being the best, it's about competition, it's about outperforming the other, it's even about, we speak about wiping out the competition. So all the vocabulary and all the values that we somehow are, you could say the dominant paradigm, are masculine values. And this, of course, this has an impact on us women, on how we see ourselves, how we perceive ourselves, how we are perceived by others, and even what is most important, how we believe that we somehow have to behave. And how can you relate that then to domestic violence? I can relate that a little bit because I'm also involved in peace building processes, and peace, when you break down, peace building, what is at the root cause of war, it's the breakdown of trust. That's the root cause of war. This is acknowledged by all the people that are active in this field. And if you then bring that down to the family and what is happening when there is domestic violence, there is not only the breakdown of trust, but there is also humiliation. And there is also that it's a relation of dominance. And then you see the values popping up. The relation of dominance is built on the idea of power. And I just explained to you that these masculine values, this is what we kind of are reifying. This is what we are teaching, that it's important to be better, to dominate, to outperform. So it's so ingrained in the fabric of everything we do that we will have to make a huge effort to somehow also start, I would say, really integrating alternative values in all the domains in society, because this is where it starts. So when we speak about compassion, when we speak about feminine intelligence, I think we have to really make a very big effort to really start creating another narrative in that respect. Because the whole narrative upon which our societies hinge, and you can still see that now under COVID-19, is built on an economic model which only functions on the basis of masculine values. So if we don't also address that, and this is where I also tie in with what Luigia say, we need another economic model. We don't need a model which is advocating for more progress, more wealth. We don't need more cars, more material things. We really need an economic model which is also based on feminine values. We need, and and this is my last word, is I paraphrase an economist. She says, what we need is economics for humans. This is what we need. And this is where our feminine values can make a huge contribution. And if we do that, then also at the level of the family structure, the fabric, we are teaching our children that it's not only about winning, competing, outperforming, wiping out the other one. This is the root cause of the problem, according to me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Saskia. And I really love it how everything also from the global conference comes together again, because this is in our economy pillar, absolutely something that has been discussed. We have to move away from money and power because that is what it's all based on. And we have to move to a more human approach and well-being and health and happiness and joy. And that is a totally different way to look at things. So I know Pam has been very anxious to share. So please share, Pam. Pam is our ambassador in not Vancouver, just Vancouver, in Canada. And also the one, for instance, who has been working together with Inspired Women Lead to represent us as the Geneva Peace Week. So also very much busy, but also in your background, violence. And so share with us.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to just acknowledge you all and Ingun and Adriana for bringing this powerful panel of amazing women together, because it's so interesting and unusual to have many diverse perspectives to shine and to bear on an issue that's so complex. And I'd just like to acknowledge the complexity of the issue, the fact that we all need to work together. Yes, female wave of change needs to work. However, you know, as people have highlighted, we need governments, we need community organizations, not-for-profits, we need academia, we need corporations, the private sector. We all need to work together on this. And I think it was Luigiana, I may have her name wrong, can't see her right now, raised the issue of the negative impacts and highlighting the negative impacts in the workplace. I think we need to also highlight the negative impacts in communities, as many of you have said. So, you know, to sell this, if you will, because it's part of we need to really promote the negative impacts, what this way of raising our kids, as people have very eloquently said, we have to highlight the diverse issues, the negative impacts they're having on society, share that we can't do this alone. And I believe I've worked quite a bit in HIV/AIDS in the past. I was project director of an HIV/AIDS surveillance project in Pakistan. And we worked with the whole country to develop a surveillance system. But anyway, and through that work, we interviewed sex trade workers and injection drug workers. We worked with academia, we worked with labs, we worked with different levels of government. And what I know to be true is that in HIV/AIDS, initially, they were only working with women, for example. And then when they started to work with men, it changed not only the narrative, but the perspective, and the programs and the interventions became much more effective. So I think there's some lessons we can learn from the HIV/AIDS experience and how they worked with communities. They worked with, you know, boys and men. They also worked with key influencers. They worked with clerics, obviously not all clerics, with key influencers, but clerics, for example, you know, they have people go to the synagogue or the church or the temple in many countries every week, and bringing, what should I say, people, you know, clerics who are on board and are more forward thinking and bringing them in as part of the equation, I think is a possibility. There are programs, I know of one actually in the Vancouver area where a woman, this is totally a different thing, where they celebrate, there's a national day and there's programs to celebrate girls in the preteen age. So this idea of making girls feel good about their bodies and educating them, right? And in Colombia, many years ago, I worked with a campesino NGO. And one of the things they were doing there, because it's very common in the Latin American culture for men, again, to be macho, as Celina has talked about and others, and you know, to beat their women. And they had a whole new socialization program about treating women with respect and recognizing not only their beauty, but the contributions they could make. So all this to say, I believe there are models. We can interview people, you know, and look at projects, pull together the lessons learned, and then, you know, do some pilots and get some funding for them, and then collaborate with groups at different levels. And certainly we need sex disaggregated data, and we need places for women to go. It's one thing to, you know, to say, you know, speak out, but if you don't have any place to go afterwards and you're stigmatized for the rest of your life, it's not a really good thing. So anyway, put my 2 cents in. So thank you very much. Really appreciate all that you're doing here.
Thank you, Pam. Your 2 cents always turn out to be 50 cents. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to give the word to Adriana.
Yeah, so we would love to thank each one of you for being here with us again and for your huge contribution in our thorough conversation. And we also have here a contribution from Dr. Lunka, where she said about the powerful engagements, and she's mentioning about the gender-based violence being as many faces, and also at it as a material possession in terms of defining values. Thank you again, and we would love to hear from Ingun now for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is also a very nice comment from Mami Von, who is also a well-respected member from our community. Thank you really for everyone, each and every one of you, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. It is so valuable, but it doesn't stop here. You know what Pam just mentioned, it is the complexity of the issue that, you know, that we need to be very driven to do something about it. Also in our day-to-day life, you know, it starts at home. It starts with us. How can we be the change? How can we recognize what is going on? How can we support our neighbor of, you know, everything? That is where it starts. So this is not where it stops for Female Wave of Change. This is very valuable input. And we have our teams already working on the next steps that we will be reshaping the future. There's recordings, but also what is happening in the chat box. I am going to move this into the humanities team for that will be the team that will actually really step up on it, but also the other teams that are working on education, which is very important, on economy, because I do believe that is very important. Financial independence of women. I haven't even heard the word, but financial independence of those who are victims is very important. So the economy is important. Health is important. If you're not healthy enough to walk away, if you don't have the finances to walk away, but also the whole mental health situation that Celina and Dr. Celina and Dr. Bindu have been talking about. That is something. So we will be working on in each and every team on these issues, on these challenges that we are facing in, and see what we as Female Wave of Change can contribute to end this whole situation, because I'm still amazed, you know, and I think, you know, this is 2020. It is, how is it possible that we're still living in a world that this happens, but it's not getting smaller, it's getting bigger. And this is something that we really have to work on. So thank you all for being here. It was really, we're really very grateful for all your contributions. And well, I'm really looking forward to take the next step. So thank you very much, and be safe, and hope to see you all soon.
Inga, if you allow me to say, just recalling what you just said, financial independence means freedom, and financial dependence is one of the most vicious common forms of violence. And if we can now, from tonight, give a big gift and take actions to keep our word, let's teach our daughters from now on. Let's repeat this mantra. Respect is not negotiable. This was the gift I received from my father, and this is the gift I would like to share with any daughter, any girl of the world. Respect is not negotiable.
Yes, I think. Thank you very much, Luigia, for your contributions, and each and every one of you. And you will absolutely hear more of us, because we are already creating this wave. That is what we're doing today, and that is how we will reshape the future. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pam.